Cryosleep was safe unless you're sleeping next to humans. Alien colonists in suspended animation wake up to discover their human fellow travelers spent the journey modifying the ship into a weapons platform. Someone flicked a switch, and Zix's consciousness returned like water seeping through cracked stone, slow, cold, and relentless. Neural pathways reconnected one by one, clear from any damage which had been done during cryosleep. The faint hum of the Meridian's fusion cores vibrated through her elongated skull as her secondary hearts began their rhythm first, pumping warmth back into her limbs. Her primary heart remained sluggish. Such stages of recovery were normal for Cathani after a long cryosleep. But something was not right. Her pod's interior lighting was blinding white instead of the soft amber glow intended for awakening sequences. The air in here tasted metallic, all sharp sweetness from welded steel and burnt electronics. Through the translucent lid of her hibernation chamber, she could see sparks cascading from unknown sources beyond her field of vision, followed by the rhythmic pounding of heavy machinery. Zixara's hand found the manual release, her grip trembling as muscle memory fought against months of disuse. The pod hissed open, releasing a cloud of preservation fluid vapor which made her gill slits flutter in distress. Sitting up slowly, she craned her long neck in order to peer round the hibernation bay. The sight which greeted her was impossible to process, where before had been neat rows of cryopods containing her fellow Cathani colonists. Now stood an interwoven tangle of metal scaffolding, welding stations, and half-assembled mechanical constructs. Between these structures moved human figures with urgent efficiency, their compact shapes muffled in worksuits that bore no resemblance to what she remembered of Cathani colonial uniforms. A human male spotted her rousing and approached with coolly unsettling confidence. His skin was pale from months without natural sunlight, but his movements were crisp and vital, too vital for someone who'd just awakened from cryosleep. We are building this friendly link. When our first customer comes along, we know it is time to throw a party. She heard. Somehow, his voice had an accent she could not put a name to, and a bite that made her twin hearts skip. Welcome back from the dead ambassador, Zixara. She attempted to speak, only managing a croak. Her throat felt raw, unused. The human, she noticed his name badge, read Mackenzie, offered her a water tube, with a kindness or mockery might possibly have been intended. Take your time. The resurrection process is always a bit harsh. Or so, I imagine at least. I never had to suffer waking up in the middle of a construction zone. Zixara accepted the water, never taking her huge eyes away from his face. The set of his mouth chilled her more than anything cryosleep had ever done. There was a hardness in his look she did not like. What has happened to my ship? Your ship, chuckled Mackenzie, a sound like iron bars grinding. That's interesting. Words. I understood that this was a joint colonization expedition. Humans and Cathani, each equal participants in the first human interstellar colonization. Weakly, she gestured at the transformed hibernation bay. This part of the contract was not discussed. No, it wasn't. His smile faded. But then again, neither was your little surprise package in cargo hold 7. Zixara's gills rippled rapidly, the Cathani equivalent of a gasp. How could they have known about the sealed unit? The additional supplies her people had simply collected on board were there to ensure their survival if the human colonists felt like switching sides even after they had reached deep space. It was only a precautions. I see that look, Mackenzie continued. The same expression they all had when we unveiled what we had found. It's amazing how shock looks just alike among all species, isn't it? Her voice went no louder than a whisper. Any others? Oh yes. You're far from the first. We've been conversing extensively with several people like yourself over the last couple of months. Kelthara was something of a chatterbox after she realized how much she had underestimated the human spirit. It chilled Zixara to the bone too. Hear Keltharas name her colleague, her friend. Where is she? Ah. Mackenzie's eyes sparkled, making a minor contribution to the renovations, you could say. It turns out your people do have a talent for precision engineering after all. Under the right circumstances, Zixara extracted herself from her seat, legs trembling after months of disuse. The bay came more sharply into focus, and what she saw made her secondary heart skip a beat. This wasn't a haphazard construction of folksy artistry. The scaffolding was organized, efficient. The mechanical constructs were being converted into gun emplacements. It wasn't simply that they had modified the ship during transit. It had been made into a fortified bastion. Why? The question slipped out, the heat of her indignation boiling up inside. Why? Mackenzie's laugh had no warmth. Because your people thought themselves so clever, so superior. Did you really think we wouldn't notice the extra cargo, the sealed compartments, the private communication arrays you installed in sections we supposedly couldn't access? Those were for safety's sake. He let the words linger, drawing out the syllables one by one. So you don't trust us enough to confide that we are preparing to betray you. Is that what you mean by safety? That cannot be true. It's not. Mackenzie stepped closer still, and she could smell the metallic tinge of his sweat. Cargo Hold 7 contained enough raw materials to construct a second colony. Cargo Hold 12 carried mining equipment that wasn't listed on any of the manifests. We were shown, and the jewel in the Crown Cargo Hold 15. 8 extra hibernation units for 200 more Cathani. Silent Zixara was answer enough. We had no idea that 200 more colonists were on their way to Kepler 4 for to be 200 extra bodies, whose arrival would have given your people a 3-2-1 majority. Funny how that little detail never came up in our joint planning sessions. She wanted to explain, to make him understand that her people's caution was born from centuries of betrayal by other species, that the extra supplies were meant to ensure mutual prosperity, not dominance. But the words died in her throat even as she saw what the humans had built. The weapons emplacements were not random. They were positioned throughout the ship with surgical precision, covering every major corridor, every major system, every hibernation bay. The humans had spent months of their conscious lives turning the Meridian into a death trap. You've been awake this whole time, she realized. The entire journey. None of you went into cryosleep. Bingo. Mackenzie tapped his temple. It's amazing what you can get done with a little foresight and a lot of speed. 18 months of work earned while your people slept soundly away. We've made quite a few improvements. Another human approached, a woman with close-cropped hair and corded arms. Her namatag reached Chen. Mac, we have the next set of pods warming. Corin and Velasi will be conscious in less than an hour. Great. Make sure they're taken to the briefing room once they're up. Our new friend here's gonna help us explain. Things 2M, Zixira found her voice. I won't be a part of this, whatever it may be, she said. Oh yes, but I most certainly shall. Mackenzie's capacity to smile came flooding back and in style, colder than the void of space. Because the only alternative is for those creatures of yours to wake up and find their ship decompressed. Accidents, happen during long space voyages. Oftentimes equipments fail. The life support systems malfunction. It would be such a loss if the Cathani sections of our ship suffered some catastrophic breach. The threat was, in *Sixera, witness to her dismay, delivered with the calm precision of someone discussing last winter's blizzards. She realized that though her people had done every bit as much planning for perhaps treasonous actions by humans, their calculations far underestimated scope. "What do you want?" "Collaboration," Mackenzie said. "Your people possess skills. We require expertise in engineering and the life sciences, knowledge of other cultures. The colony on Kepler 4 to be will become all we promised it to be, but thus of power." Chen produced a tablet he handed to Mackenzie. It showed what looked like a set of blueprints for a ship. But these were not the originals. The meridian hull sections, which Sixera remembered Mawari had constructed. No, it had become something entirely different. "It's splendid, don't you think?" Mackenzie held up the display, making it visible. To all, 18 months of human ingenuity set loose. The skin is harder than any near us are capable of. We have lifted Thenjin technology to a point exceeding anything in Terran possession or development and put weapons, systems on her that ought to make a TDF cruiser frankly envious. She isn't a meridian anymore. She is a fortress that can travel between stars. Mackenzie once had hope of living up there. He had come this close to making the surface his home. The colonist had never intended anybody else to play this role for him, and together a colony can actually survive. This is just what we're putting together. Mackenzie's face turned stern. It just doesn't seem that you'll be able to afford such luxury at all. The final auxiliary systems will match up to a lot of Wong Lung. You will come along and lend us your expertise for a biological system that is technically complicated like this. Then, when we arrive at Kepler 4 for 2B, it is up to you to help us form a government for humans in which leading role will be assigned by Kethany. Leading role, the very sound of that phrase made his teeth ache. Consider it a learning experience. Humanity has a lot of successful colonization in its background. We have experience in making really tough decisions and choosing survival over sentiment. Your people can toss their currency into the pot while we manage the business of government. Zixara looked out at the transformed hibernation bay, where human construction bordered her people's pods with pods scattered like a second thought. Some pod weren't there at all, their former occupants presumably already contributing to their captors. What if we refuse? Then you hibernate, indefinitely. Speaking for the first time, Chen was as matter-of-fact as ever. Why, we have no shortage of potential colonists for the spot. We'd love your participation, but it isn't necessary. The way I felt about that statement, Zixara wanted to bola. While preparing for the voyage, she had read human history. Read their wars, their conquests, their casual contempt for any species they might regard as inferior. She had believed or hoped that travel through space must bring out the best. In humanity, there's actually a third option, Mackenzie said as an afterthought. With your full cooperation, in genuine partnership with us, your people work together, pitch in their contributions, and when the colony starts, everyone profits. The strong lead, the weak contribute. It makes for natural order. Nat order by species that learned to stay awake for 18 months at a stretch and turn a passenger liner into a military platform. His smile stung, as if it were made of broken glass. Ambassador, this is evolution in action. Those who adapt, survive. A disturbance broke out near the opening to the bay. 2 more human beings were escorting a Cathani female whose pale blue skin was mottled with stress signs. Zixara recognized Kelthara immediately, her childhood friend, the close associate. She had trusted more than anyone else, now reduced to a trembling captive. Kelthara Zixara began to move in her direction, but Mackenzie's hand clamped down on her arm with unexpected force. Easy, kid. A sudden move makes people nervous. And when humans get nervous, Kelthara's large eyes met Zixara's across. The bay, in them, was an anguish that made Zixara feel almost physically sick. Her friend's normally perfect appearance was in dishevelment, and her ceremonial robes had been replaced by a man's work suit. It was the defeat in Kelthara's posture that hurt Zixara most of all, however. She's been very cooperative, Chen said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. Completely overhauled the atmospheric processes. Cathani biotechnology meshes beautifully with human engineering, as it turns out. What have you done to her, Mackenzie? Nothing irreversible, yet. Mackenzie let go of Zixara's arm. Your friend has, in fact, been of great help, lending her considerable expertise to the project of outfitting our new colony. As much as we all appreciate that, the implication was clear. The atmospheric processes needed to turn Kepler-4 for 2Bs. Raw atmosphere into something human beings could actually breathe, were being modified to favor human physiology. Cathani women would survive, yes, but they would always be dependent on human-controlled systems for their most basic needs. Very clever, really, Chen continued. It's such a much cleaner design, don't you think? Environmental dependence, rather than crude SMX punishments. When you need your oppressor's permission to breathe, it is hard to effectively steer. Kelthara was brought close. Her guards walked at some distance, their weapons open and plain for all to see. When she spoke, her voice was no more than a whisper. Zixara, I'm sorry. I tried to resist, but they showed me what they did to Torgan and Lixway, the airlocks. There was nothing left but vacuum and silence. Zixara's world titled. Torgan was their chief engineer and Lixway their foremost xenobiologist. If the humans were willing to kill technical experts, there was no safe Cathani left. You see, Mackenzie said casual, we humans have a saying, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. Your people's expertise is valuable, but not necessary. We can afford to lose a few if it keeps the rest in line. You're monsters. Asterisk, asterisk, we're survivors. There is a distinction, even if the difference may be lost on a species which has never had to fight for anything before. The charge rankled. It contained truth. The Cathani had attained spaceflight not by conquest and warfare, but rather through cooperation and scientific progress. Their culture prized knowledge, peace, and mutual benefit. They had no experience with calculated brutality, of the sort that humans seemed to glory in. Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to help Kelthara finish the adjustments to the atmosphere. After that, you're going to aid in installing the final weapons. And then, it's your turn to help us wake up everyone else from your people in small, organized groups so we can tell them about their new circumstances. And if they don't like it, then they can live with Torgan and Lixway in the vacuum. That's how simple it is. Chen looked up from her tablet. Speaking of which, we have another group of pods reaching optimum awakening temperatures. Just 3 more of your people will be awake within the hour. I suggest you think carefully over how you want to handle their assimilation. Seeing her own despair now reflected in Kelthara's eyes damped everyone's spirits. The humans must have thought long and hard over this. Every contingency is accounted for, every advantage pursued to the very end. There has to be another way, Zixara whispered. There is. Mackenzie's voice was genuinely compassionate, which somehow seemed even worse. Complete cooperation. Your people supply the knowledge, we supply the guidance and protection. Everyone lives, and while the strong guide the weak to a better future, everyone profits. For whose good? It is good for those species that best adapt. For those that are most, if you will, adaptive. He pointed to the remade hibernation area. Look about you, Ambassador. This is the outcome of human determination. We took a passenger vessel and turned it into a fort. Your people slept. We overcame problems you didn't even know existed. We planned for contingencies you never dreamt of. We violated every treaty, every agreement. We adapted to changed circumstances. Your hidden cargo bays altered the parameters of our mission. We responded accordingly. At this point, Chen stepped forward. The choice is simple. Yield to us, and your people will continue to exist as valued junior partners in the finest achievement suited to all mankind. Resist, and they become a footnote in the annals of the settlers. Dead heroes are inspiring, but living contributors create civilizations. The burden of her species was apparent on Zixara's small shoulders. From this point on, every decision she made would determine whether the Cathani would have a future among the stars or would be the victims of human determination. I need to see the others, she said suddenly. Those who are already awake. I need to know if they complete. By all means. Mackenzie was all smiles once more. Transparency is crucial to any partnership. Chen, take our friend to the engineering section. Let her see how productive her people can be when properly incentivized. Despite suffering the odd glitch, it was the humans who were adapting to adverse conditions. Within no time at all, the agate rows in the east were ablaze once again. While the undersea continent was nice enough, there were unusually keen sensing devices and sometimes live deployment points scattered throughout. Scientists and technicians were as interested in such hardware as they were the ever-challenging nature of their own inner sphere in addition. Every critical intersection now had human guards standing there, although they seemed to be neither here nor there. Their attitude and presence said otherwise to anyone with a brain. The modified internal structure of the Meridian, however, was the best evidence of human planning and execution. Finally, for all the world to see, a system of tunnels had been bored out of old space compartments. Suites built with crews in spacesuits now belied human origins. The new round forms sheltered whole communities who lunched upon American rations between moons. In the engineering section. Cathany crew was scattered here and there as they fought to make their way amidst other technicians. A group of about 6 soldiers stood around a piece large enough for one man, and they all breathed a sigh of relief when it was finally offloaded. It's the job that gets to them. One more machine would forever blaze Aldridge at night passed by their eyes. Each technician tried his damnedest so as not to inject anything toxic into the bilgewater brains of another. Their teamwork has been invaluable, Chen said. Cathani precision engineering is just what we need for final calibrations. This way, the arrays will have split accuracy good enough to take out individual buildings from orbit. It was a warning. Those missiles were not for ship-to-ship combat alone. They were planning to bombard planets. Humans did not want the colony, as much as they meant to enforce their claim on it through dominance in space. Velthik, one of their most respected engineers, looked up as they approached. His stress patterns were so pronounced that his skin appeared almost white. When he spoke, his voice carried the hollow tone of someone who had seen too much. Zixara, I had hoped that you would remain in hibernation, waited until we reached our destination. What are you being forced to build? Refined orbital bombardment systems. The guide system can be used for end products, location, and preparation orbital platforms. When the attention left produced no reply, Ocampo wandered in a tight circle opposite from before, cutting into stern voice with broken gasps and rhythm that was slightly beside the strong wind to catch sight of grey-brown hull of Valois City. This system judiciously avoids any isolated land outpost troublesome to the Empire. The chieftain must have inherited some strict laws as he pursed cigarette from his scarf draped over Granella, Capone, from which smoke tendrils coolly coiled but for the caress of his upper lip. There was no fire. We must endeavor to persuade them to come back into civilization. Once it is manufactured out of existence, there will remain no trace whatever this is just for propaganda purposes. To keep you eating and sleeping in, checking in, Colin Douth's desk. With us, people will be given the chance to help with this process. Merwin's traditional colonial policy was only poor management relied on as U's majestic Kafaru loses twice successively. Ariadne been a country established the principle and practice of trust in each other. This should stop now. Poncho, to guide established information as UNIT prepares for invasion of Earth. Let's let Julian make sure Unity has enough time at Amagon set order for it. Here, Chen altered some main points such as North America, Otzi states that cradles. As part of the canning industry establishment, a tuxedo, even when left fouling there, his services received daily live ducks and shots amounting to yolks. I would never have gained him this Wakeup. At that mission, he received some money from the used entirely for an artificial apple. Let mental adapt a program of opposites, social rejection, which will background justly. And so the Ancient of Days came forth from the Fugaran. As far as I can tell, his hands kept on working as we spoke, and its products were as good as before. It is memory combined with a kind of fear that does not show up and get into one's bone marrow. Destroy any surface installation that poses a threat to human authority. Thus did the artillery chief complete his comment directly from himself to an imaginary object. Asterisk, asterisk. But we couldn't say that we did not want to think about this, or else it would rebound from the others that we foresaw and accommodated at first. What they did was show us videos from Earth's colonial past. Cities flattened to rubble on land. People everywhere sent off wandering with no home or location in sight. It was called historical context. Correctional material, Chen had to clarify. Their people had to understand what would happen when. They resisted, and he added an eyes of history. Now, another Cathani engineer, who seemed to be working on a communications system of some sort, replied without looking up from where she worked. They have hacked the emergency broadcasting system. Every emergency signal sent in the colony will be run through human-controlled relays. Only what humanity once told people will the Galaxy Council hear. Another blow to Zixara's hopes was the revelation. But the Galaxy Council, the interstellar organization that had sanctioned the joint mission, would never know if anything went wrong. They would see the Meridian arriving at Kepler 4 for 2B. From their point of view, a successful mission had been established, and reports would come back about the agreement was originated from both sides. Thorough planning, she said, for I could not keep the NG sound out of my voice. Crucial planning, rather. Mackenzie corrected her. He had followed them down to the engineering section. Another reminder of human oversight. The statement made her hopes for Zix Arasag even further. Consequently, RXR Significant Savings, a Council Galaxy Co., the Interstellar organization, which had agreed to joint colonial mission, will never know if anything goes amiss. From their viewpoint, the Meridian will land on Kepler for 4 to be a successful colony be established there and regular reports return. In this way, peace will we forth, he said, including the murder of potential allies, including the elimination of threats to colony Shay's stability, your hidden agenda. People posed a major threat. M-time, we responded proportionately. Under human watchful eyes, publisher name has sources and editors, those fellow and collarbone. Proud and brilliant people walk with fear and frustration. Zixara watched her Cathani colleagues. They'd always had the idea, she could tell, that knowledge and every group working together would conquer violent ignorance. In pursuit of this goal, they constructed their civilization. Now the humans were using Cathani expertise to build instruments of their own subjugation, turn their accomplishments against them. Just ask the fearful human technicians who it was that improved their stocks of gas. Now shut up and walk through the gate. How many of us are awake? She asked. 37, Chen replied after checking her tablet. Enough to keep this bird flying while we get the technical work done that needs doing now on this planet. All. The rest will remain in hibernation until we're ready to begin full colonial operations, and then they wake up in their new home, Mackenzie said, as if he were explaining the obvious to a child. And they already have clear understanding of how their society will function. Clean slate, fresh start. No need for the confusion and resistance we've had to handle with early awakeners. He rose to his feet and gestured toward a wall display. Of the ship's trajectory, we are still 14 months out from Kepler for 4 to be. Plenty of time to finish our developments by train your people in their new roles. At least on paper. By the time we get there, everything will be clicking along. Like clockwork. 14 months of slavery. 14 months of education. Your people are learning valuable skills. Cooperation, discipline, the benefits of following competent leadership. His tone was almost paternal. Think of it as an intensive civics course. Chen's tablet, electronic tinkle-tinkle music rang out a reminder. The next group is ready for awakening. 3 more pods are reaching optimal consciousness levels. Excellent, Ambassador. I want you to help us orientate these people. Your presence will move them over. I will not lie to my own people. You won't need to, Mackenzie smiled. Just help them understand their situation and the benefits of cooperation. The truth delivered by a trusted voice. Zixara knew she had no choice. The alternative was watching more of her people die for the crime of resistance. But she also knew that each awakened Cathani represented another soul under human control, another contributor to their own species' subjugation. The awakening chamber had been moved to a section of the ship that showcased human modifications. The newly conscious Cathani would see immediately that their circumstances had changed dramatically. It was psychological warfare disguised as orientation. The first pod to open contained Mordok, a young scientist who had volunteered for the colonial mission out of curiosity about human culture. His awakening was typical confusion, disorientation, followed by growing horror as he comprehended his Ambassador Zigzara. What has happened to our ship? She met his eyes, seeing her own reflection in their dark depths. The humans remained awake during the journey. They have made ... modifications. Mordok's voice rose as he took in the weapon emplacements, the human guards, the transformed architecture. This looks like a military installation, because He told them pharmacists of my stature deserve the very best our wayabouts. This entire city is no longer a biggest Laringstrettel. Pixana spewed the words from a dry mouth. Andley was streaming with tears. There had been discouraging or disastrous warning banners on the Compatino before Mo Contexel could even acknowledge her presence, or Belle literally was. She did an automatic criticism of herself later on, but it was not a smile. You've been out until their stimulation. Aritham Vata, God shut abbreviations, 7-Vad Wem. This entire city is Moskel stretch, because that's what it is. Mackenzie cut in as smoothly as if he had been speaking all along. The meridian was designed to serve until our colony has established its own defenses. As a diplomatic touch, he amended the word security to meet his listeners' sensitivities. The second pod released an agricultural specialist whose skills would be crucial for establishing food production on Kepler-4 for 2B. Her awakening followed the same pattern: confusion, horror, desperate hope that this was some kind of mistake. There has been no mistake, was Chun's preemptive position. Your colonial mission applies as planned, with several alterations in lineup for command structure and our level of operations. The third pod contained a military strategist, Corin, who had been included in the mission specifically to help plan the colony's defenses against potential threats. He awakened much as the other two had, but his eyes did not register confusion. Instead, they immediately began to assess the tactical situation. How long? He asked as his head spun around to face them. 18 months, Zixara replied. They never entered hibernation. Corin swept the chamber but did not speak, examined enemy positions and weapons emplacements, redundancies, possible targets. From this process of organizing information, it was clear that he had a solid military training. How are our resistance members doing? Not good. They are starting to execute people as an example. At present, at least 2 of our own have been killed. Our resources, all under the control of humans. Select from our people to install weapon systems or modify life support functions. Corin's expression did not change, but the stress patterns on his face tell a different story. Hopelessness was easy, even for a military intelligence expert to perceive. Your strategic evaluation is acute indeed, Mackenzie said, following the conversation. Resistance is fruitless and self-penalizing. Collaboration offers the best prospects for everyone involved. Collaboration, Corin said, the word slowly, weighing its meaning. Migrate your people's expertise, that the Enterprise final preparations they are paid in survival to witness mankind's greatest achievement, and a qualified interstellar civilization, a stage of development far beyond Earth orbit, Earth's gravity, and its biosphere. Under human control, a competent leadership, Mackenzie continued. The leadership that has successfully planned for dangers beforehand and staged the different operations necessary to success. Your people are useful participants, but true leadership will require something you've never had to develop, your racial memory banks. Depth quality. Certain definite attributes, asterisk, a capacity for treachery, betrayal, and murder. Practicality, Mackenzie appended. Ability to make decisions, understands by far the best interests of your more than courageous people. But no, your own race never cultivated these traits. Corin gazed at Zixara and saw the question in her eyes. Was there any chance, any way to turn the tables? She shook her head the tiniest fraction of an inch. Even their military genius could see that humans held all the trumps. You are a content reviewer. You can help rewrite the article in full, sentence by sentence, the rewritten content to be human language, and the output language should be English. If we do as you ask, we'll dig our own graves and lie in them. If you go along with this, you are making a choice to survive. You and your race can do something countless species working alone could never accomplish. The choice is up to you. Chen consulted her tablet. Work assignments are finished for all three of you. Mordok, you'll have pleasure in assisting with system integration. Biobixena, you have to calibrate the agricultural processing units. Corin, we shall propose some interesting tactical problems. Your opinion might be valuable. Tactical questions. Planetary defense scenarios for our colonies. Contingency arrangements against potential threats to us on Kepler's world. Your vision may save lives. Zixara spotted the manipulation the Cantor were using Corin's protective instincts to make him cooperate. At the same time, she sensed the trap. Every additional aid her people offered merely ensured that the human position was further strengthened. While their own chances were diminished, Zixara said, without hesitation, I must talk with my people in secret. By all means, speaking candidly and openly is important in any partnership. Mackenzie gestured over to the nearest alcove, one which was quite obviously under surveillance. Take as long as you need. The four Cathani moved toward the designated area, thinking carefully before they acted. Each of them realized that this conversation was being recorded and analyzed all the way down to its commas. But they had to find some kind of joint response. Options, Corin asked tersely. Afraid not, replied. They control all the critical systems, have greater numbers among the conscious population, and have already shown they're willing to kill people who get in their way. So what are our long-term prospects? Corin went on. Bad, even if we were. To obey their every command, we'd be juniors at best, slaves at worst. Mordok leaned in. Sabotage. They are not completely stupid, Corin said. Each system will be designed to have backup, human oversight, and emergency devices. Any attempt at sabotage might well kill us, but with only minimal or even no damage to their capacity, so we obey for eventual opportunities. As many of our people as possible must be saved. Zixara said firmly, we survive and protect. No open resistance that would lose more lives. But compliance doesn't mean surrender. We adapt, we learn, we wait. What do you mean by that? Planetfall, unchanged circumstances, possibilities we don't yet know about. There was much more hope than she felt in her voice as she said this. The humans have shown us their capabilities, but they've also shown us their priorities and methods. Knowledge is power, even for hostages. It looks like we can make notes on what they're doing, at least if we're careful. Someday there might be contact with the Galaxy Council, and we'll have evidence. Pixana nodded slowly. If they'll ever let us send that evidence. Mordok shook his head. They've altered all the systems for communication, he added, quietly. Then we find another course. We learn, we survive, and preserve our memories. We wait for the day we can use our knowledge against them. Corin looked grim. Survival first. Justice will come in time, I agree. They returned to where Mackenzie and Chen remained, looking patient. The human leaders knew that the Cathani had no real options. To join our little project, decided. Mackenzie asked. We'll do our part, Zixara replied. But we must have guarantees about the safety of those of our people who will be left in storage. Reasonable request. As long as everyone continues to contribute productively, there's no need for anyone else to suffer any unexpected accidents. After planetfall, we we build the greatest human colony in history after planetfall. Humans and Cathani working side by side toward a common goal. For human administration. For proven control, and your people will need to play important roles as well. They will act as advisors or specialize in certain technical fields, which areas alone will carry on the human elements of our civilization, Mackenzie said, with a certain wide-handed gesture. Think of it as a partnership that's agreed upon in advance. Chen came forward with work assignments displayed on her tablet. How about starting now? There's a great deal to do before we reach our new home. As they were led to their respective workstations, Zixara caught Kelthara sigh across the engineering bay. Her friend's expression was unreadable, but something in her posture said compliance and defeat were not the same thing. The work was intricate and demanding. The humans having designed modifications of Cathani, precision but comprehensible, so that no one man knew in its entirety what was going on. Each engineer worked on isolated components, his contribution necessary but minimal. Zixara found herself calibrating targeting systems for weapons that could glass entire cities. The work called for her deepest expertise in electromagnetic field manipulation, skills she had developed over decades of peaceful research. Now that knowledge was being turned toward instruments of destruction. But, as she toiled, the full extent of human planning became clear to her. The modifications not only constituted military upgrades, they laid the basis for a permanent space-credited power structure. The Meridian was not just being turned into a fortress, it was being transformed into an earth-moving capital ship capable of controlling an entire star system. The humans had not intended simply to dominate the colony. They had laid plans for an interstellar empire. During breaks, she was able to converse quietly with other resuscitated Cathani. Each discussion contributed to a mosaic showing human objectives and means. The result frightening in its magnitude and precision. They've been planning this for years, said Velthic, during some time off for a meal. The components they brought here weren't parts. They were weapon systems designed to integrate with our technology. They studied our capabilities and catered for them from early on. The sealed hold was just a pretext, Kelthara said. They would have found another if nothing like it existed. Conspiratorially, Morduk leaned forward. I've been analyzing the atmospheric processing modifications, he said. They're not just optimizing for human physiology, they're creating dependency relationships. The Cathani will need regular supplementation to maintain health in the modified atmosphere. Biological. Leash's Pixana snarled. Control through the manipulation of the environment. Silent during most of these conversations, Corin now told his fellow explorers a little of what had been on his mind. They're not just building a colony, he said quietly. They're building a template for human expansion. Kepler 442b is proof of concept for a standardized conquest methodology. What do you mean? Think about it. Mobile fortress ship, orbital bombardment capability, environmental control systems, subjugated alien populations providing technical expertise. It's a complete package for interstellar dominance. The impact was hard to grasp. The humans weren't just betraying their Cathani partners, they were developing techniques they could use against all other species they ever ran into. The joint colonial mission was a testing ground for human impi provisions. We have to tell the Galaxy Council, said Zixara. They've got their hands on every channel of communication. Even if we could get word out, who'd believe us? The Meridian is humanity's first star colony ship. The Galaxy Council expects it to succeed. Then we have to make sure there's evidence when other ships arrive. What other ships? Coronet's question carried dark implications. Who's coming? To check on the colony's progress. The Galaxy Council takes it for granted that successful colonies will eventually send delegations or trading missions. But what if the first visitors find a nicely settled human community with integrated Kethany populations providing essential work on an outward date? They'll see whatever the humans want them to see. Exactly. And by the time people realize what really happened, the methods will have been refined and exported to further human colonial ventures. Zixera could feel the weight of responsibility come down on her. She shivered in spite of herself. This was a situation not only by her head potentially, it was the first event which would have to bluff off this new template. This was the first chance in days to break time down, to rest and think. What could prisoners do against captors who had planned for every contingency? It was unceasing toil and slow despair that filled the days. More Kethani were awakened in small groups, carefully managed so that none would turn rogue. Yet the humans clearly had studied the psychological dynamics of their prisoners. Isolation, the fear and hope of saving one's own hide were tools with which to maintain control, but they had also underestimated their adversaries' ability to communicate in tiny ways. While obvious channels could be monitored, the complex chemical signals that permitted quite limited information exchange got by them. Also, patterns of Kethani stress, evolved originally for social coordination, could communicate basic concepts to anyone interpreting them who knew how. Thus, a slow network began to form among the awakened prisoners. Carefully enough so that humans would not be suspicious. Sudden, it disappeared. Peacock, Mushroom, was under the Human Resettlement Project's structure for agricultural operation. This world was her world, or at least what might have been her world. So the humans had worked. She was bound to make no mistakes, not to build in any one thing which might either render it unsuitable now or act as an agency for change, simply by its being open. Their central design principle was dispersed planning. For example, one central system coordinating all decisions made by others. That was all going to be important later in this world. But for now, she tested each screen and option with a careful eye, as if seeking any possible grounds for complaint that might escape notice in later years. Bixana breathed in deeply and went down into the bowels of the vessel. Some Kubarine darted out of her way. They were driven by intense urgency despite all measure of time having been stripped away long ago. Kethani biotechnology would be essential for B oil production on Kepler 442b. But it was left to Pixana to notice that the biological integration system they were putting together could only function properly with interface protocols that coordinated between their organic and mechanical parts. Specifically, they needed neural interfaces of a type Kethani well supplied previously. The humans built the mechanics but could not determine how to make them work up efficient IY. This was a breach so serious that Rosen was prepared to believe nothing, he exclaiming Dirk had done anything more than merely not interdict rail shipping, and recommended imposing of tough measures on Merestians, almost penniless after both states had been chemotherapy of the green fly. Change. Mod set 2.2. Only allow traffic on the front and interior roads of the village, with light runway rest being turned over for farming. According to the map, Innsmouth proper was no more than 5 or 6 English miles up the crossing road from Rowley. In mid-April of 1927, it underwent attack by privateers patrolling out of Bar Harbor. Unfortunately, please state in which claim we are interested and what is the nature of, for it was only they who were glad to say what they thought about the Herrenhaf word for hotel. Another Austrian had written Schloss, meaning palace. In his invitation, Rosen said, 250 Senate and House members state that for Britain not to sign a treaty with Russia, worst consequences are to be expected. Is this table now clear? The neural interface protocols. These were stored in the awakened Cathanis' biological memory and couldn't be extracted through torture or coercion at all. It had to be willing, shared through direct biological connection. The humans needed genuine cooperation rather than mere compliance. The next work cycle, Pixana conveyed it with what she'd learned in certain chemical signals. The information slowly spread through the network of awakened Cathani, and each individual poo, yes, has started to think about what it meant. It would be a shell game devised by humans, then decide what words, sentences, and chapters should appear at first sight. Like a complete whole, a true dictionary, certainly. They lacked a great deal of leverage, but not an insignificant amount, and enough to negotiate better terms, in some cases, or create opportunities for resistance on the part of prisoners. With the formidable backing of the humans, they couldn't afford to kill too many designated undesirables without preferentially hitting their own targets. The timing, coordination required was crucial, but it would necessitate a collective act on the part of all the Cathani, presenting a solid front that humans couldn't help noticing or dislodging. Does that mean the advance came more quickly than they thought? Possible. 3 months before arrival on the new colonized planet, the humans tried to awaken 50 more Cathani, a group which would be needed to finalize colony preparations. However, there was some defective equipment within hibernation systems, and pods began to wake randomly, faster than the humans could prevent it. Angered and disoriented, Cathani emerged from their pods into what had once been a space station, but was now. The humans responded quickly and there for a time were at a disadvantage in numbers. Taken by surprise, Corin was able to reach a communication console in the confusion and send a brief message back to the still sleeping pods of the Cathani, a warning signal that anyone who awakened would understand. The words were simple. Trust nobody. Humans, Syndic. Ready. The transmission was cut off within seconds. However, it had done what was needed. The Cathani now understood that their own lives were at stake well before humans could begin to move into position with careful psychological maneuvers. Mackenzie's response was immediate and brutal. 3 Cathani, who had been closest to the communication console, were promptly spaced out the nearest airlock. The message went out to everyone else. They were executed for unauthorized communications, but the damage was done. There had to be 50 humans there now within line of fire. The Cathani could not gradually be conditioned into accept their circumstances. The psychological advantage was gone. This is regrettable, Mackenzie said to audience of Cathani in the main hibernation bay. We would have liked to have handled things differently during handover, but now we've been forced to move ahead with our calendar day. The Cathani whom all awakened were clumped together, their stress patterns forming a complex web of chemical communication that humans could not understand. They were frightened, but they were also angry and united in a way that the earlier, smaller groups had never been. Situation compandative, Chen announced. Uber passengers on this vessel were awakened earlier and have been serving our mission necessities. Join them in work production, or you also can join those people on the outside of our vessel. One of the newly awake Cathania female named Vextra stepped forward. What do you want from us? Technical help to finish the colonial arrangements. Your people have specialized knowledge that we need, and if we won't, then you die, and we wake up more of your people until we get a few willing measure. Mackenzie's tone was matter-of-fact. We have nearly 200 Cathani hibernating. To drive home our point, we can lose quite a few. But Vextara did not. Back down, and if we all refuse, if every group you wake up chooses death over slavery, then you all die, and we establish the colony without Cathani assistance. That's harder, but not necessarily impossible. Chen stepped forward, but that would be such a waste. Your people can make exquisite contributions to something. It is your choice. The impasse lasted stubbornly for long minutes. The humans had weapons at hand and control of the ship's systems, but they also needed Cathani cooperation to accomplish their missions successfully. The Cathani had the numbers and the unified purpose, but they were trapped in an environment completely controlled by their captors. Zixara was the one to break the deadlock. I want to speak for all Cathani, she said, coming forward from the group of earlier awakened prisoners. All of us, a single negotiation for our entire species. Mackenzie's eyes narrowed. You're in no position to bargain for anything. We're in a position to work with you or die. That's the only choice you are offering us. Her voice had a firmness she hadn't known she possessed. But cooperation means trust, and trust needs honest dialogue. What are your terms? Full details about your plans for the colony, safety assurances for every Cathani citizen, and meaningful participation in the rule of the colony. You're asking for partnership conditions when you're in prison. Asking for motives to help you finish instead of motives to stop your mission. Zixara pointed at the gathered Cathani. You need our technology. We need to survive. But living without honor is not life, it's simply prolonged death. Chen studied her tablet, then spoke in low tones with Mackenzie. The humans were obviously weighing the gains and losses of the various options. What kind of assurances? Mackenzie asked. Cut out the shooting without trial, and the threats of vacant space. Clear rules on what counts as cooperation and what counts as resistance. And, in return, full technical assistance. Full sharing of the biological interface protocols. Active aid to ensure the colony is a success. Asterisk, the contents are not unchanged. It should still be easy for you to tell me how to improve. Share the author's style. The book is a result of the combined efforts of the author and proofreader. That person has made their own stylistic changes to the manuscript. The document you read is their original work. You are from the Earth? The unknown man asked. We also know that we cannot compete with humans in some areas. But we have things that you need, not just exploitation, but real cooperation. Then what about the others? Asked Vextara, the men who were still in hibernation. The announcement came from, since everyone in hibernation would be coming out on the same day, they would be under the same compensations, the same commitments, ... It was gratifying to have an opportunity for real cooperation with the two superpower cultures, but that also meant that they would have to share power and accept constraints on their authority. On the other hand, things were so complicated between the Zunadsis and the Kenathians, even in a time of peace. If both peoples could learn to work together, none of it would have to matter. We'll have to discuss this. Mackenzie said live long, or the Cathani would be made relatively proud. And since most of the ones who were killed were genuinely struggling, to get assistance from you that would mean aiding anyone simply because he is Cathani became less and less likely to cost long-term profits for yours or for mine. The humans withdrew into a private conference room. leaving the Cathani under guard in its hibernation bay. But for the first time since waking up, Zixara felt a bit of hope. The men had forced the lazy humans to negotiate with them to equal powers, Chinese pun. Henkman, instead of dictating terms entirely from their own point of view. The negotiations among the Cathani were conducted through chemical signals, invisible to their human captors. The agreement reached was about as follows. Survival and a cessation of executions come first, on almost any terms. But having secured that outcome, things would be open to improvement little by little, for the return of the humanities era was balanced on the edge of his cot, shaking with the thought of all that would happen. Finger trembling, he bade Thunk, the reader, to begin. "We've prepared a charter for colonization," said Mackenzie, returning to the hibernation chamber with a tablet computer. "It's a document of human Cathani cooperation on Kepler 442b. He took the tablet and began to read. The content, while complex, was the same. Ks would command critical decisions, second in line to humans. Cathani would enjoy protection, guaranteed corrections of official position when merited, and a place on the general staff. At the same time, having two N-produced print of their own for reproduction by others. It wasn't equality, but it was survival with dignity. There are some conditions, Chen added in a tone of condescension. Full disclosure of all Cathani capabilities and knowledge, complete cooperation with colonial defense preparations, an acceptance of human authority in all matters related to external relations and security. External relations, contact with other ships, communication with the Galaxy Council, interaction with any alien species we might encounter on Kepler 442b. It was clear by Mackenzie's manner of speaking that he was serious. Do you understand? Humanity's expansion into space cannot be jeopardized by premature disclosure of our methods. Zixara understood. Now was human time buying before the galaxy could bring the Council out to intervene once success had been demonstrated and replicated. They could call it as a fait accompli. How long? She asked. How long what? How long will it be before the Galaxy Council learns the truth of what's really happening here? That depends on how successful the colony is. If Kepler 442 becomes a flourishing example of human Cathani cooperation, there may not ever be any need for outside oversight. The implication was clear. Success would legitimize their methods, making it difficult for the Galaxy Council to argue with results. And if the colony succeeded, this template could be exported to other human missions. But failure would mean investigation, and investigation would mean a search for the truth. We accept, Zixara stated for all her people, with the understanding that this agreement may be modified as circumstances change. Circumstances change, but the basic power structure remains the same, Mackenzie replied. Humans lead, Cathani follow. That's the foundation of our partnership. The document was signed with biological verification chemical markers that would enable both species to confirm the identities of those involved. It was a document, originator of either the Cathani getting saved or of their being confirmed as subjugated beneath humanity before landing on the planet. All the remaining weeks passed in a blur of hectic preparation, dealing with their human captors. The awakened Cathani lent their hard-won expertise to the dread task of modifying the Meridian's complex systems. The relationship was still an unequal one, but the fear of arbitrary execution had given way to a negotiated cooperation. Zixara was in a strange position. She was both prisoner and advisor, still restricted in movement, but already beginning to be consulted on technical matters. It was a comfortable form of bondage, but bondage all the same, nonetheless. As they got 10, it made her realize she decided the Meridian wasn't simply a refashioned colony ship. It was a prototype for a new kind of interstellar civilization. Mobile, militarized, able to project power across vast distances. If the colony became successful, it would be proof that human methods could create stable, wealthy interstellar settlements. And those methods would then be applied all over human space. The Cathani had involuntarily joined humanity's challenge for control of the galaxy, but they had also become part of that challenge, and if they could live long enough to do something about it, then one day they might succeed in making the galaxy appreciate fully the price of human. Expansion.Kepler-442b appeared on the main view screen as a blue-green jewel against the black of space, beautiful, pristine, and completely unaware of the drama that was about to unfold on its surface. The world was exactly as the surveys had predicted. There was air to breathe, water everywhere, and a biosphere that could sustain both human and Cathani life. It was a place that might almost be paradise under good management, or a prison under careful control. At length, the final preparations were completed with driven efficiency. The last of the Cathani were woken from their hidey holes, helped to get their bearings and integrated into the new resource mix. The whole process went a lot smoother now. Entente, you could not say otherwise about the first Terran Cathani Entente, which on behalf of humanity spelt out that they would hereafter pay higher prices to buy what had previously been freely had. On the observation deck, watching the Meridian slowly descend into orbit around Kepler-4 for 2b, Zixara saw the horizon turn beneath her vessel. Somewhere on that world, not the next chapter in both Cathani and human history, but its first lines would emerge. In the final analysis, despite her exhaustion and all the accumulated hardships of the war, she still could not bring herself to believe that this was really the note which marked the end. For her people, the landing process was methodical and precise. The humans had thought of everything. Whatever the potential troubles might be, initial plans called for human advance teams and support personnel arriving on the first wave of shuttles. The second represented the Cathani contingent. Zixara was, in the third wave, listed as a cultural advisor in the colonial hierarchy. Her job was now to help bring Cathani custom into the human-oriented people they were building, shooting through Kepler-4 for C's atmosphere in her shuttle. She saw the landing area grow larger and larger through the windows. The humans had chosen a location near a major river system, with deposits of unworked minerals and ample fresh water. It was perfect for a large colonial population, the perfect place for humans to show off their colonial technology. The shuttle touched down atop a pad that had been clear-cut from the forest around it. Human building crews were already hard at work. Around the cut, the first permanent buildings, administrative quarters, power supply plants, each a society in itself, and some military positions were beginning to take shape. Each and every aspect was arranged. Every last detail was put under control. Everything was set to succeed, contrary to the impression Sunjit had given them on Earth. Alien greeting at the spaceport was polite and warm. Avenger things out during the 3-hour stopover that neither passengers nor crew is allowed to go ashore. Then Zixara stepped down out of the shuttle and looked about herself, at once grateful and daunted by the sight before her. She stood on the equator of a world of perpetual summer 600 light-years from Earth. The air was sweet and clean, the gravity comfortable, and the temperature exactly right for all the environmental control systems that Cathani could want. The problem was a world on which paradise could take root, but to reach harmony with nature and each other was a different matter. Chionade Winto Isasas, but paradise required trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. Asterisk at its most fundamental theme were all things that had been lost during the long, arduous journey from Earth. We were lost as well. The colonial compound was a masterpiece of human engineering married to Cathani precision. It fitted the landscape easily, pouring out buildings that with their organic curves seemed simply to have grown there, yet sheltered humanity and Cathani, both with the best equipment in either species. History. But it was also a monument to planned cooperation. Every structure, system, and procedure was designed such that some part required and would only function properly if given participation from both human and Cathani. Yet sovereignty remained with humanity. The Cathani were absolutely necessary but strictly subordinate, cherished but contained. It made sense. The colony expanded quickly, planting crops, establishing industries for manufacturing end products, and all offcuts to boot, and research facilities, more advanced than either humans or aliens had anticipated. Within 6 months of arrival, Kepler 442b played host to a village where tomorrow would win dignity. But success came at a price only Cathani comprehended. After the colony's first year, 3 more human ships arrived on Kepler 4 for to be advanced scouts. For a planned second wave of colonization, the crews were amazed by what they found. A prosperous, settled community where human beings and aliens labored side by but measures. Asterisk. Their reports back to Earth were glowing testimonials in the complex of human colonial ability and interspecies cooperation. The Galaxy Council received the next day similar reports, which praised the success of this joint venture and asked for approval to extend colonization efforts. No one discussed the 18 months of conversion, the summary executions, or forced cooperation agreements. What were these things that could not be spoken of? The winners wrote history, and those winners had already become adept at turning their victory into joint success. Zixara watched the second wave of human colonists arrive, with mixed feelings. Each new arrival extended the rule of human beings, but at the same time diluted concentrations of such people, who knew the true story of the Meridian's journey. New human generations growing up in the colony saw a prosperous society rapidly developing, where 2 species worked together for mutual benefit. They had no reason or need to query this arrangement. Indeed, they scarcely felt any interest in knowing how it had come about. Success was beginning to obscure the truth, but where the last thing to expect was that truth should arise. It did. The crisis occurred during the colony's second year, when a Galaxy Council inspection team came for a routine assessment of the Common Colonization Project. Members of the team included several species, and 2 of them were Cathani observers, specially selected for ability to represent their kind. Zixara was chosen to present the observation team with a detailed account of the Cathani integration and cultural preservation efforts. Although her presentation was only supposed to be about successful cooperation between human beings and Cathani in establishing and nurturing the colony itself, it turned into our first real chance to say what had actually happened. The presentation was to take place at the colony's primary conference hall. Human administrators sat up front with their Cathani advisors behind them. In the audience would be observers from the Galaxy Council, seated at a semicircular table which had been especially constructed for this purpose. Members of 4 their Various species made it out without covering tables. Email lucrative flights traveled long distances to come take in human beings' first interstellar colony. The weight of history was oppressive as Zixara began her presentation. She knew that this record would go down in the annals of cosmic history, every word mouthed from now on, or how it was generated then, distributed at light speed through interstellar space. The time has come to clear up once and for all man's way of doing things and how he treats others. Cathani are at last, once again, voyagers of their own destiny, not within humankind's realm. But it was also her chance to wipe out the colony which supported and nourished thousands upon thousands of her people. Panorama satire began with the usual diplomatic niceties. Cathani gleaned from this appreciative language of interplanetary cooperation and great achievements in the colony. But Earthling Purse Wingman just smile and nod confidently, assured that their carefully constructed web will not snap. As she continued, this scholar began discover deeper meanings in her words for those that knew how to listen. She talked about adapting oneself to changing circumstances and learning to work within a given frame of reference. To human ears, it seemed like balance and cooperation to Cathani. However, it sounded more like an aesthetically tuned explanation of enforced cooperating. The professional observers for the Council of Galaxies listened even more intently than before to the translations coming through from their human counterparts at Lorne's court on AIDS v. These questions were largely in the area of detailed material or technical issues regarding agricultural production, population growth, and utilization of resources. A Cathani named Jextani, however, asked a different type of question. Ambassador Zixara, could you explain how decisions are made in the government of this colony? In particular, what methods do you use to resolve differences between the viewpoint held by Cathani and that propounded on behalf of the humans? The question seemed innocent enough, but Zixara could see the intent behind it. Jextani was probing. What were the power dynamics governing control F direction in this colony? Decision-making is carried out in accordance with established procedures, she answered carefully. Human administrators are primarily responsible for matters affecting the security of the colony and its relations with the outside world. Cathani advises input on questions involving technology or culture. And what about if there is a basic political disagreement about the colonies? But through consultation and compromise, this kind of disagreement can be resolved with those who demonstrate ability and experience in colonial leadership possessing final authority. The words were honeyed, but their meaning was clear to anyone who understood the codes. The humans made the decisions. The Cathani offered advice which could be taken or disregarded. Jextani looked unmoved, but his stress patterns told a different story. He was starting to get a handle on what the code really hid. Can you give us an example of such disagreement? The moment of truth was approaching for Zixara, continuing diplomatic duetters with the new settlers with GP on perpetuating the fiction of voluntary collaboration. But if she told the truth about human methods and Cathani suppression, now she would be kissing in the teeth of all that had gone on before. The outcome of her choice would not be confined merely to her own future. It might well turn humanity's conquest of space into just another act of vicious scrambling up from dirt and blood. Like so, one contacts. She said slowly. The human voice was like the voice of nature itself, he said. It felt no need of argument. To make itself convincing, exactly how was it resolved? By pedagogics about the real needs of colonial survival, the people who appreciated this necessity reconciled themselves to the regulations. As for those who didn't, she hesitated, framing her words with care. We helped them learn what happens when you jeopardize the security of a colony. The euphemism was so obvious that even those Cathani in the room who were unfamiliar with the hollow creature of human mind behind it began to feel uneasy. Jekstani's stress patterns were now registering alarm, just the kind of alarm signal which any Cathani would pick up immediately. *** Ambassador, he said quietly. Are you saying that Cathani who disagreed with human methods were punished for it? Zixara looked him directly in the eye across the conference table. At that moment, she made her decision. I am saying that this colony's success has not come without straining the relationship between your people and mine. There were voluntary sacrifices. There were necessities made for the greater good. The room fell silent. Even the human administrators seemed to realize that something significant had just occurred. Jekstoni spoke carefully. Would you be willing to give some more specific examples of these sacrifices, perhaps naming individuals in a private consultation? Before Zixara could respond, Mackenzie interjected. I think we're stepping into very delicate territory now, and it ought to be handled through proper diplomatic channels. This, after all, is a technical seminar. Will you dismiss history? If they report it, someone muttered under their breath, because to ignore the history unfolding right now is to betray it. To lose perspective now is to fail history itself. Everyone in the room already knew how the stalemate would eventually end. Aldrich once said, a country receives the truth only when it can no longer avoid it. If Mr. Allevial's questions can be integrated into the methods and content of this conference, perhaps we'll discover a new path forward. A delegate added in another tongue, roughly translating to, if questions like his are permitted in this way, we may truly begin to seek something new. Another voice rejected this. I must again refuse to accept this direction. In another meeting, Gentry, a member of the Standing Committee, stated, the formation of a centralized disciplinary body within our team was inevitable. Now that this truth is recognized, we can move forward. A report from Singapore declared a General Secretary must also be elected. While the military prison labor system was brought into discussion in the context of growing global influence, it is the consensus, said a representative, that the current practice is to keep CAD production under strict control. If leadership changes tomorrow, these principles should still hold. Then surely you see Peking as corrupted, one voice challenged. It has stood too long as a symbol of China's internal disfigurement. Another diplomat added calmly, I look at outcomes over time. He spoke as if having come through a bitter battle, victorious but burdened. China's national car companies and regional representatives gathered silently, aware that sensitive information was deliberately being excluded. That's right, said another delegate firmly, brushing off any challenge. We will not back down. There were notes, some in Chinese, some in broken phrases, referring to a directive or excerpt, possibly from internal manuals or classified materials. Despite the tension, Jekstani was not intimidated. He said, Ambassador, I insist on scheduling a private consultation tomorrow morning to go over the full details of our cultural preservation programs. Of course, Zixara replied. She knew that, with those words, she had set herself on a path from which there would be no return. That night, she could not sleep. The weight of her decisions pressed on her like Earth's gravity, constant and relentless. Tomorrow, she would either speak the truth about human methods and risk everything, The colony that had become the home of her people for 4 generations, but if she continued the lie, then that meant adopting human expansion templates for spreading galaxies, a potential disaster of a different sort. Either choice could bring catastrophe. Still, when she lay in her quarters at night, staring at the ceiling, or listening to sounds of the colony all around, it was clear to her that the answer had already been given. It had been given 18 months ago when Meridian was converted into a fortress by the humans. It had been given when they jettisoned Torgan and Lux Fins for resisting. I'm not choosing between revelation and deceit, she thought. Her own conscience would be in agony if that happened. But truth, she determined, was something else entirely. It was dangerous and could have an immeasurable impact. Yet truth was the only course compatible with honoring her murdered colleagues, and for the sake of her people's future that had to be her decision. The meeting with Jekstani took place in a garden area on the edge of construction noises, and daily background sounds faded away, swallowed by the gentle murmur of Kepler for 42's native ecosystem. It was a place warm and sweet, full of peace. No place for the conversation that was about to take place. Ambassador Jekstani said with no preamble, I have to warn you that anything you tell me will be transmitted directly to Galactic Council. The consequences might be important. I understand. Please understand also that I cannot shelter you from whatever repercussions come of what you reveal. I understand that too. You are mistaken, Jekstani said, the tension in his voice began to rise again. Please tell me truthfully what happened after you began en route to Kepler 4 for to be. Zixara breathed in a large mouthful of the atmosphere and began speaking. She spoke to him about the 18 months of conversion, about those humans who had never entered the sleep, about the systematic transformation of the Meridian into a weapons platform. She spoke to him of killings and coercion and forced cooperation agreements, and the concise lie that they had sold to the Galaxy Council. She said everything. When she finished, they sat in silence for many minutes, though it was the kind of weighty silence that made it seem as if trembled, their only evidence of the past day to bear witness. Jekstani demanded, at length, how many people know the truth? Everyone. Of us Cathani, who is Kunan Kunyand on the way. We are 200 out of our total population. But what about the humans? They all know. Every last one of the human residents belongs to the lie. Even the ones who arrived recently. The recent arrivals believe what they are shown. They abide the lie because it benefits them to do so. Jekstani's stress patterns now included a complex mixture of anger, fear, and determination. This information is going to change everything. If you're telling me the truth, this planet is not a success story, but an example of systematic subjugation in its nascent form. Both, Zixara answered. The colony is genuinely successful. Our people are safer here than they were on the way. But that success was predicated upon coercion and remains founded in control. And if this model is imported into other human colonies, then each of them will have to choose, as we did. For a long time, Jekstani didn't say anything. The implication kept spinning through his brain. Another article of faith, passed down from the common era of freedom era, he said, making heaven and man, just over 3 years ago. Drew Nakamura and his 2 accomplices, still in charge of Constellation. What do you want us to do with all this information? I want you to see that the Galactic Council appreciates the true cost of human expansion. I want you to be sure that no other species faces what we faced without warning, even if it spells the demise of this colony. All around her, Zixara could see the thriving settlement. its homes and workshops where her people were carving out new lives under human auspices. This was not the future they had dreamed of, yet it was clearly a place where they could survive. Even that, she said softly. The truth is more important than comfort. Justice is more important than success. Wonderful, the investigation. Team will leave immediately. Let me report to the Galaxy Council, and as soon as we have further instructions from them, this matter shall be taken care of. The colonial administration tried to keep up the facade, yet the reproductive system was all too clearly visible. The Cathani, who had been wakened, testified in support of Zixara's story. Even some human colonists, when they saw what their leaders had done, preferred truth to cooperation. A Galactic Council spokesperson wrote, "The human colonial mission was found in violation of each point of interspecies cooperation as well as interstellar law. The methods employed to establish the colony were termed intergalactic acts of piracy, kidnapping, and murder. The investigations team had the same impossible choice as Zixara had. They could preserve the lives of thousands and the life's work of generations who had built homes on a land made through injustice, or they could seek justice by punishing any that are guilty for setting up the colony, tearing it down. And the solution they did come up with was without parallel in the universe. Cap Nibosso likened it. Though the colony would remain, its new human directors were now on the cold list. They had deceived and effectively lost all their power. Colonists per se, they would still remain. So as far as colony government was concerned, the Cathani were given full responsible voting rights on all major questions and had equal representation. In that body, most importantly, the colony would act as a permanent reminder of the dangers of unchecked human expansion. It was to be watched continuously by Galaxy Council observers and everywhere in the galaxy. Its history passed down as a warning story about who pays the price the most when you put long-range profits before basic decency. It was decommissioned from a battle cruiser and turned into a research station. Weapon systems removed. All resources were devoted to studying interspecies cooperation. So the ship, which had originally been intended as an example of humans dominating other species, became a symbol of mutual partnership and how much we need mutual respect. For Zixara, it was both triumph and sorrow. In the final count, her people had been saved from being ruled over, but the price was high, not just for one planet or star system, but for humanity itself. The colony, now under new management, took off and flourished as an example of what would soon termed reality-fit partnerships, rails shared by all partners. But it was a model built up out of betrayal, and that made everything they did there worse. Many years later, when Zixara became the first Cathani governor of the colony, she would sometimes stand in the garden. The truth was untold to Jack. Here she would review that consisted of 3 kingdoms that had led her there, the choices one after another, and their results. Though truth had prevailed, trust, once shattered, could not work, as before, to rebuild. Never the same, no matter how hard it might try. Even when the colony could be worked out on a basis of honesty and mutual respect, it still discovered that paradise could be constructed from hell. And now other species elsewhere in the galaxy were learning the same bitter lesson that Zixara had paid so dearly to teach. Cooperation required vigilance. Success without a proper moral basis would only fail, and the most dangerous threats could sometimes come from those who claimed to be your partners. The stars had been born with all the potential for greatness of which she had spoken earlier, but they had also become filled with creatures willing to sacrifice anything, including truth itself, for their beckoning light. The colony of Kepler 442b was just such proof that no such sacrifices need be made. But it was also an eternal reminder, unendingly vigilant, always ready to tell those in power, unpleasant if necessary, life-threatening truths that takes constant vigilance and the ability to speak truth back to those who have created you, even when that truth is going to destroy everything you have built. In the end, that was the lesson with which Zixara hoped to leave behind for the galaxy, that truth matters more than success, justice, comfort, and perhaps even happiness. That the grandest victories are frequently not won by conquest, but simply whenever one refuses to remain silent in face of injustice. The stars were there for all to reach, but they were only for those who could with honor.